Losing your vision can be confusing and hard to accept, especially when you're not sure what to expect.
Am I going to be blind for the rest of my entire life? Am I going to be stuck in the dark forever?
Personal stories about family, career, and finding hope.
I had no idea how to function as a blind individual.
The Blind Reality. New podcast episodes drop every second Tuesday. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is an AMI podcast.
I'm Kelly McDonald.
I'm Ramya Muthan, and you're about to embark on the complete Kelly and Company podcast experience.
It's full octane Kelly and Ramya with all the fixins.
Live from the Accessible Media Studios, this is Kelly and Company. Entertainment, lifestyle, and great conversation. It's AMI Audio's on-air community, and everyone's invited. And now, the host of today's show, Ramya Amuthan.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Kelly and Company. It's going to be a nice ride today. Lots of great conversations. And our friend Kelly McDonald isn't joining us today as he is at home, very busy. Lots of stuff to do. He's, in fact, I can let you in on it. He's watching movies, prepping for our AMI at the Movies Season 3. We're, it's just a little hint of what's to come later on this year and early next year with the next season of AMI at the Movies. Later on, I'll even tell you what's airing this Saturday on AMI at the Movies on AMI TV. But that's what he's doing, a lot of busy work. So here to fill in, tough shoes, is Brock Richardson, host of The Neutral Zone, joining me to co-host the show. Brocky, how's it going today?
How's it going with you? It's going well. I'm happy to be here. I love Thursdays. I particularly love the roundtable on Thursdays. So I love the fact that we're actually going to get to do that. And of course, we'll tell you more about it in a second. But I wonder how many movies Kelly will actually get through on one day. You know, whether he'll sneak in whether he'll sneak in a little bit of sports or not, or just be solely watching movies.
I don't think Kelly, or maybe you as well, put into this bag of generalizing, can really focus in on anything solely without a hint of sports here and there. Is that true? Like, do you check sports headlines throughout the day or have a game on in the background regardless of what you're doing, or, replay games from last night that you PVR'd or anything like that? Am I making all this up?
I can confirm that I have had on my Google Home, which is a foot away from me, I have had sporting events on it in the background while doing various shows, but I just kind of check it over in the commercial breaks, see what's going on. So yes, right. I have done it, but I don't do it very often unless it's something big going on that I don't want to miss.
Okay, so you can go a couple hours without checking sports headlines. You're okay.
I can, yep.
All right. Now I got to ask Jeffy when he's not. Oh, he's joining us later. Yes, we can ask him that because I'm curious about him as well. With people being such sports fans, and honestly, a lot going on in sports all the time. I was curious about how long you can go. I can go a day without talking about Harry Potter, but that's pretty much it. That's my comparison.
I actually thought you were going to say I could go a day without talking about sports, and I'm like, only a day?
Just a day. I'm so obsessed otherwise.
Yeah.
Brock, let's tell everybody what's coming up on the Thursday edition of Kelly and Company. We're talking to Master Gardener Judith Lavin, and she's joining us every other week. Today, she's talking about biodiversity and the important role that native plants play in our ecosystems.
Robert Half released its State of Canadian Hire Research, which reveals companies hiring plans and pain points. We learn more with Regional Vice President of Robert Half with Michael French.
Really looking forward to that update. Also, as Brock pointed out, we have our weekly roundtable later on in hour 2 of the show. And our guest for today's conversation is Leanne Brown. I also like to refer to these as victims. Leanne Brown is the audio and IT systems specialist at AMI. We have lots of good conversation planned for her. Rocky, we're not going to step away from sports just yet, as the opening ceremonies for the Tokyo Olympics are only a day away. I can't believe we're here finally. We're talking about it all the time. But with COVID-19 cases surging in Japan, there are still calls to cancel or postpone the games.
You won't hear the cheering of fans during these games, but what you will hear is the chanting of protesters in the streets around the capital. People demanding that the games, already delayed by 1 year, be delayed again or canceled altogether. Nearly 2,000 new coronavirus cases were reported here in Tokyo in the last day. One anti-Olympics demonstrator held a sign asking, "Is it more important than life?" Jim Ryan, ABC News at the Summer Olympics in Tokyo.
Interesting question they posed with, is this more important than life? And I do wonder how much longer. I mean, of course, we're going to hear about and hear the actual protesting throughout, I'm sure of it. But how much longer it's, you're keeping your fingers crossed if you're on the side of we should really cancel the Olympics, keeping your fingers crossed to it making a difference and even part of the games being canceled or part of the events being canceled, or if anything along those lines is going to happen, just a mere adjustment to the games just full on being held, all the events actually taking place. Brock, what are your thoughts? I mean, it's this late, it's happening tomorrow, right? Like one sleep away. What are your thoughts on the protesting and all of this still going on?
As a matter of fact, and I will sort of elaborate this on a different direction, but I did my vanity card today on the fact that the opening ceremonies happen after two events have already began. So even though the opening ceremonies haven't occurred, we have two events that have already started. So realistically, we have seen the start of this event. And I think at this point, we are going to be where we are, and the games are going to go, unless you see some real big, massive, outbreak, more than we already talked about on Monday in the village. I think this is we're going to power through regardless of what the protesters say, because if their voice hasn't been heard up to now, it surely isn't going to be heard during the games. And I just hope that if these games go through and happen, that the Paralympics don't suffer based on the 2-week break between, where they say, well, we did this and now we have this issue, so we're going to cancel these. That's where I'm worried about, versus saying, are these ones going to be canceled? Because I think we're here now, and unless there's some massive outbreak that we're not hearing about, I think we're powering through, Ramya.
Yeah, and regardless, down the line, right? Like 4 years from now for the next Summer Olympics, we may not be seeing the problem of coronavirus. But I think there is going to be some real heavy lifting for the Olympics after this one, whether it be the winter or the summer, because, people are trying to really get their voices heard. And I personally, I don't feel like they are. We may not have a live audience. Yes, the stadiums are not filled. Yes, but people are still upset and people are worried, and the numbers just keep going, as we heard. So it is kind of a tough one, Brock, to be like, yeah, but after Corona ends, it's going to be over, right? We're going to go back to normal Olympics. I don't think so. There's going to be a lot of other things. We've talked about it in the past about, can cities afford the Olympics? Why are they spending this much money on X when they could be spending it on Y? So we're still going to see a lot of this kind of thing make an impact on future.
Yeah, I think so. And you often do hear that people that make investments on these games don't actually recoup their costs. They lose. So the Olympic Games is not a moneymaker. It's more of a pomp and circumstance to have it in your city versus a viable moneymaker.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a pause there on that conversation. I'm sure lots more to come. But after the break, in 2020, Audible Original, our friends over at Audible, released their fairly unique take on King Arthur in the form of an audio drama series. We're going to find out more and what the impressions were like for Michael Fair after this break on Kelly and Company. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Kelly and Company. Thanks for joining us 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on AMI Audio. Also, if you want to kind of bring the conversation a bit bigger, you can call us at 1-866-509-4545 and leave us a voicemail on that line. Of course, if you want us to play your message on air, please give us permission to do so. And feedback at ami.ca is how you can get a hold of us via email. And on Twitter, if you like the social media approach, we are at AMI Audio. That's our handle. I'm Ramya Amuddin here with Brock Richardson, and on Thursdays, weekly, we like to check in with our friend Michael Fair. Today, I hear he has some interesting audio dramas for us. Let's bring him on.
Hi, I'm Mike Fair. iPhones, iPods, and iPads are everywhere, and they're doing great things for the blind. We explore all that, plus audio entertainment, dramas, podcasts, internet radio, and games. We share it all on Kelly and Company.
The story of King Arthur has been told many times over, and back in 2020, doesn't seem like that long ago, but back in 2020, Audible Original released their pretty unique take on King Arthur. And Mike, you said this is one of the most unique takes you've seen of this. So this week, you're going to be giving us your impressions on it. Where does the story start?
Well, it starts in 490 AD. And basically, the Romans have left. They've retreated from Britain and gone sort of into Europe. And basically what's happened is the tribes have to fend for themselves. They have the Norse, the Viking raiders invading from the north, and they're squabbling among themselves as well. So there's one leader, Ambrosius, who has brought them, has finally succeeded as the play starts in bringing them all together under one banner to try and build a nation. And he's getting older, though, so he has to deal with a lot of the strife that's happening and try to keep everything on track. So it's a pretty big, epic beginning, long before you usually start the story of King Arthur.
What about King Arthur in respect to growing into the just leader that we're all familiar with? Is that a part of the story?
Well, that's one small part of the story, because the thing about this is King Arthur in this, the fellow that is the young Arthur before he's king, of course, he's the son of Ambrosius, and he's their best warrior. He has proved himself in battle. This is no coward. He is a brave fighter. The problem is he's kind of a jerk. And so we see basically him start from very inauspicious things. He doesn't act to save one of his first loves, Lady Anna, from being executed for remarks she made. And basically it kind of goes from there. So he treats his friends really roughly. And rather than it focusing on his journey to becoming the Arthur we know, this is more about how the legend around him is built, the politics behind it. So it's a very different take on the whole journey. We're not sort of following along with his adventures as much as others that are around him.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Mike, if some people might be disappointed in the story because of that, the angle being so different.
Yes, it is possible, because if you're going in this expecting the adventure, almost the fairy tale of King Arthur that we know, of Merlin, the magician, the wise, the knights around the round table, what we get instead, this is looking behind the curtain. This is looking at earlier sources that sort of the historical evidence for a character named Arthur, and earlier sources for the myth, where it might have come from almost. So it really pulls back the curtain. And it's gritty, it's dark. It's, so if you don't want to sort of look behind and just want to keep your image of that quintessential Western hero, that King Arthur is to some people, you might be very disappointed. And this is for adults. This is not a kid-friendly story at all. Very mature content, very grim, greedy, ambitious, harsh decisions made stuff. So this is, this is not anything like the Disney King Arthur or anything like most King Arthur takes that I've ever heard.
And how long is this particular drama?
So this goes for 6.5 hours, and it's sort of divided up into 13 parts. Each of those parts is about half an hour. Some of them are slightly longer, slightly shorter, so you end up with like 6 hours and 32 minutes roughly. But that's basically the breakdown. So it's pretty easy to navigate, easy to skip around in, get to where you were, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And short bites. Okay, so let's take a listen to the trailer because I am intrigued.
On your feet, soldier! The walls are that way! Griff! Cled! Get to your feet! Find your footing! I can't! Yes, you can! Come on! Spears! Take cover! You all right?
Just about. Oh, this is hopeless. These rocks won't protect us for long.
Better here than on the causeway. It's only another 50 feet to the gate.
Oh, might as well be 1,000. We're pinned down. They could drop off the mountain on us like this.
By Christ, that was close.
What do we do?
All right, men. On my signal, fall back. Fall back to the valley.
Wait, look.
By God's balls, they've made it through the line. Through! The ford's breached! We have them! Advance!
Nice. I feel like we got a pretty good adventurous part of the trailer, though.
Yes, that was definitely a battle sequence there, yes.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so can you go through some of the characters that we view the story through?
So there are many different ones. We jump between them, so it doesn't really center on any one for very long. Arthur, of course, is there, but he's not central to this. Like you get glimpses of his journey as he goes through. It's also his friend Owen, who is sort of a general and a loyal friend of King Arthur's, despite how roughshod he is with him at some point. Griff is a soldier, so you get sort of a lower rank look at what's happening, and we heard a bit of Griff there in the trailer. As well as Arthur telling everyone to charge. Ambrosius, he is kind of the central older figure. He's approaching the end of his life. He's an old emperor, and he's trying to groom Arthur to fill his shoes. And we follow his journey a lot. If anyone's really a central character in this, it would be him. We get quite a bit of his life up until it ends. So that is a very different, sort of almost a central thing in the story. Lady Guinevere is leader of the Legion city. So this is like a city that has housed a Roman legion and has remained a strong focal point for society. And she governs that community, leads it really strongly and well. This is no wilting wallflower. She's a strong leader, argues, speaks up for the troops, cares about the people. Merlin is, I've never heard Merlin portrayed quite the way he is in this. He pops in and out, fairly regularly. We get a lot of Merlin, but again, he's not central. But boy, very different than anything I have ever heard done with Merlin before. And really well acted. So that was great. And there's good villains too. We got Wolfgar, Lord of the Vikings, and we sort of get his take as he tries to negotiate with all the Britons. And Mordred or Midrod, as you hear him referred to, is this other central figure to the Arthur legend that's sort of there, but not as we're used to. He is a scheming British noble trying to use foreigners and anyone he can to get power again. He's had a big defeat at the beginning, and we see him try to claw his way back. And then Lady Anna, of course, very interesting arc for her as well.
Mike, you mentioned there just briefly about the acting. Any other particular comments on the acting? You seem pretty high up on this.
Yes, the acting was really well done. We've got Garth David and Lloyd. Yeah, Garth David Lloyd. He did Griff, and so that was some of him you heard, did that really, really well. Lois Chabinim, I probably totally butchered that, plays Lady Anna, and wonderful, wonderful work there from her. Really sticks in the brain as just excellent acting. And David Holt played a very different version of Merlin. You'll know when you hear Merlin mentioned, you'll know it's him, and you'll see what I mean about that. Just wow, just a totally different take on the whole Merlin thing. And then Owen Teale, who's famous. I've heard him before in other dramas, and he'll be familiar to a lot of listeners. Was terrific as Ambrosius. So solid casting throughout, but those four really, really stand out in this drama as it goes through.
Mm-hmm. Mike, the scene we heard was a definite scene with sound and music because, well, at least sound because it was a battle scene. But what did you think of the sound and music overall?
It was not quite like your ordinary movie. There's very little music. It only appears in transition scenes, so you don't usually hear it in where you'd think you would, or during battle like that or anything. It's always when you're transitioning from one place or one character's viewpoint to another. So a very different use of music. And the sound staging, again, not quite like a movie, but the stereo was used really, really well. So it helps you really track who's saying what and keep track of where people are in relation to each other. So, and the atmosphere was very well done. All the soundscapes in the background were very well handled. Good. I'd say it's good stereo sound. It compares well to other audible original dramas. But if you stack it up against Big Finish or Graphic Audio, I think it suffers a little in the sound quality compared to that, but not much. It's noticeable, but it's not like so bad that you'll go, oh goodness, right? Like the sound is solid. It's there. It's just not quite as immersive as I've heard in other places.
Mike, we got a little over a minute. What makes this worth the price for you personally?
Well, for me, it is. I'm not trying to pay the $25 for it. If you're a non-member, that's what you'd be paying. But for members, it's either $17 or an Audible credit, and that is you certainly get your money's worth. 6.5 hours of pretty well done audio entertainment, and it is the most unique take. It's all about the power of stories, the power of how legends are born and shaped, and even truth versus mythology, and when you need them both, and why they're so important to people, and how rumors spread. So it's very relevant to today. With the amount of misinformation we're dealing with and everything else, it kind of it was very thought provoking. I ended up thinking, well, how far have we really come if we're still sort of wrestling with people changing the narrative to suit their ends and to sort of attain power. And that's kind of when you look at the formation of Britain as King Arthur, that was sort of their keystone legend in a lot of ways.
Exactly. And that's why taking a big legend like this to talk about that, to bring up this whole conversation, is a real interesting twist. Mike, we got to go. Thank you so much for bringing this one.
Absolute pleasure.
You can find Albion, The Legend of Arthur, on Audible. And if you have a membership, you can get it for 1 credit. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Master Gardener Judith Lavin about biodiversity in our gardens. We'll be right back. I just love when we go back to old legends, I don't know, classic stories, whatever, fairy tales, things that, you grew up with or you just know because they're so big and so popular. And then our friends over at Audible or other things like this, other platforms, get something so unique and so creative out of these stories, right? Sometimes I know that we have these conversations like, where's the creativity? We're just making retakes and remakes of everything. And then other times I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. It's a completely, our conversation with Mike Fair on this complete unique take of King Arthur from Audible Original. It's just fascinating to me, Brock. And then you might think, I want to now go back and listen to the original of King Arthur just to do a comparison.
Yeah, it's interesting because as we were doing that segment, I'm thinking to myself, as long as we do, the spin-offs justice, because I find when we do spin-offs of something old and then it kind of gets watered down, but this one sounded really great, and the trailer that just sold me on it. The acting seemed good. It was really good. So
yeah, it's kind of like a behind the scenes of King Arthur, right? Like all the stuff that happened between the stuff we know already, between the battles and everything else we know. But yeah, it's really great. I mean, even, not everybody's a fan of Shakespeare, but I loved reading Shakespeare when I was in school. And I went to a lot of the plays as well. And when Stratford has anything on the list that's audio described, and if it's Shakespeare, to me, it's a bonus. Because I'm like, yes, I love it. But there's so many of these modern takes of Shakespeare and people's own perspectives and perceptions and all kinds of stuff. And I just think it's fascinating because some of this stuff is timeless, right? Yeah. Like Mike was asking, why are we still having these conversations? Because it's true. This stuff still happens. Political drama and other kind of drama and relationships and things like that. It is all very real today. So that's why these classics and legends and stories really do live past when they were made.
Did you ever read the book Outsiders in school?
No, I didn't. That's when we didn't read.
It was on the gang that was done, and the book was really good in that case, but the movie was done so much better. Like it was, sometimes when you get those books and it's like, oh, the book was so much, so much better, so much thicker and all that jazz. But no, this one was really, really good to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're listening to Kelly and Company, and you're here with Ramya Amuthan, myself, and Brock Richardson.
It's time to chat gardening with our friend Judith Lavin, who's here all summer to tell us about our gardens. Judith, welcome to the program.
Well, hi there, Brock and Ramya. It's lovely to be here again today. So today I thought I'd like to talk to you a little bit about biodiversity and native plants, and about which we are hearing more and more these days, and maybe suggest a few plants we could consider just adding into our gardens.
Sounds like a great conversation. I think most of us know what biodiversity means, but for those that may not, could you give us a little bit of a reminder of why this is important?
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, so simply put, biodiversity is a combination of biological and diversity, and that includes diversity within species and between species and within ecosystems, and it refers to all living organisms. So diversity of species, that is a mix of species, is crucial to the protection and survival of entire ecosystems, even small local ecosystems like our backyards and even as small as our balconies.
Okay. So last time you mentioned on our gardening segment with you, mentioned adding more native species to our garden. So how does doing that, adding these native plants to the garden, help with biodiversity?
Oh, that's such a good question. So when we include native plant species in our gardens, we increase the presence of food sources and habitat for native insects and birds. And so our gardens attract these species and they help to sustain them and perpetuate their life cycles. And we increase the overall health of our gardens. And keeping in mind that native plant species have evolved to thrive in our gardens and in our climate, they seldom need special attention in the way of irrigation. They don't need chemical fertilizers or herbicides. And think of it this way. If we replaced every invasive introduced species in our garden with a native alternative, we would be doing our bit for our own ecosystem. And this is so important, especially in an urban environment. And there are some fantastic resources out there for anybody who might be interested in thinking about doing this and making some changes.
You have a little bit more on invasive species. We hear so much about these days.
Well, that's everything's interconnected, right? So I think the important thing that we are all coming to realize is that in the interplay of native and introduced species, sometimes native plants can be dominated and they can become endangered if their habitats are overtaken by plants that have been brought to this country. And that's what we mean by invasive species. And this is a subject that is worthy of a discussion all of its own. But basically, invasive species, they reduce biodiversity by outcompeting native species. And the reason they are able to do this is because they very often have no natural predators, either insect pests or diseases, that keep their populations in check in the way that native species do within a balanced ecosystem. So by increasing the use of native plant species when we can, we help to keep that balance and increase biodiversity.
So, Judith, do you mind giving us an example of a plant that we might know and how it contributes to biodiversity this way?
Well, I think that our native milkweed is a good example that even the youngest school child would recognize these days. So we all know that it is the host plant for the monarch butterfly. If milkweed were to disappear, there would be no monarch butterfly, so it's that simple. The female monarch butterfly lays its eggs on milkweed, and the caterpillar feeds on the leaves to complete its larval stage. Native insects, pollinators, and other beneficial insects, as well as birds, have such a long-standing and complex interrelationship with native plant species, and many, like the monarch, require a single species of plant to survive.
This is a bit of a diversion, but on the negative side of things, can you give us an example of how these plants and species are for the ecosystem and how they can be destroyed?
Okay, so one good example, and I think it's one that we might be familiar with, would be an ecosystem that is taken over by an invasive species. So, for instance, here I'm thinking of those huge stands of the common reedgrass, Phragmites, that are to be found throughout Ontario in wetlands, roadside ditches, and verges. They're just, you can see them along the QEW, you can see them along every highway virtually. They're those very tall grasses with the very big plumy seed heads. They outcompete our native bulrushes and cattails, and they completely take over large swaths of wetlands. They're fast-growing, they're deeply rooted, and very difficult to eradicate once they take a hold. I think in our own gardens, and especially if we live near parkland or conservation areas or near one of Toronto's ravines, we need to be conscious of the way introduced plants can spread and take over areas that we want to preserve for our native species. So I'm thinking here about like a plant like lily of the valley, for instance, which is so lovely and we all love it, but it's a prolific spreader and it easily escapes from its garden plantings into the wild. So we could start to think about replacing some of these species with native alternatives.
Wow. Yeah, we have to, I think we're not as familiar still with native plants as we should be. When you say the cattails, I was like, oh, that's native? See, I had no idea. So how do we find them?
So if we're looking for plants to plant in our gardens, and what you're saying is absolutely so true, and it's true for me, and I know for many other Toronto gardeners too, it's a subject in which a lot more education needs to happen, I think. And it is only recently that garden centers and bigger nurseries are coming forward with selections for us to buy for our gardens that are clearly labeled as native species, and they're starting to market them in a way that is easy for us to identify. So in fact, this is the first summer that I'm aware of that the big box stores and garden centers have had whole sections devoted to plants that are labeled as being native. And it's a really welcome development. And I think we'll be seeing more and more of this as interest grows in planting native species in our gardens. Yeah.
What's the biggest reason for this type of change, do you think, happening now? I know you said that there's still room for improvement, but it does sound like there is a big change in how people view this type of thing.
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. I think, it's interesting the way that philosophy around gardens and their aesthetics evolves and changes. We don't garden the way we did a generation ago. There are always fashions in gardens, but we are in general, I think, much more conscious of ecological principles these days. And this is where using native species has come a little more to the forefront.
That's a really good point. Even not just how we garden, but where we garden and how often we're doing it. So what are some of the changes that you're noticing?
Well, I think one of the most interesting changes that I've noticed is in the idea of that front yard monoculture, the lawn, with its high maintenance requirements in the way of fertilizers and herbicides. Another is our realization that impermeable paving is really less than ideal. And this is particularly apparent now in urban areas, of course, as well as rural, but in urban areas where flash flooding is so much more frequent. So we're rethinking ground covers, pathways, for instance. And then I would say there's a change in aesthetics in landscape design as well, from I guess what you might call the formal to the informal or naturalistic, with a movement that welcomes a bit of messiness. For example, not cutting everything back in the fall, like leaving seed heads on ornamental grasses and leaving spent blooms on fall blooming plants over the winter for a bit of winter interest, and also with the understanding that beneficial and pollinating insects use these plant structures as a habitat through the cold months, and that birds rely on seeds and on the fruits that remain on trees and shrubs and so on throughout the winter. And
is that how native species fit in this type of circumstance?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. People are turning to them because of their many advantages. So first, native plants are adapted to our local climate, as I was saying, and our local growing conditions, including soil conditions. Native species are ideal for people who want to garden organically, since they don't need fertilizing, pesticides, they require little to no watering. But most importantly, though, they do provide food and habitats for insects and birds, and they improve our ecosystems, and they're ideal for increasing the biodiversity of our garden spaces. And interestingly, I would just add that many of the native plants I would recommend for the garden and for containers on the patio and balcony are really coming into their own right now in this season and in the late summer and fall, just really when we need them the most in the garden.
That's really awesome. So do you have any final thoughts on native species in the garden?
Well, I think it's just good to remember that they are lovely, they're easy to grow. Plants like black-eyed Susans, coneflowers, just to name a couple, they'll grow and they'll overwinter in containers too. That's one of the other things that makes them so useful, is that they're typically very hardy to zones much colder than our own in Toronto. So if you're growing in a container, just make sure your containers are good and deep and large. It gives them a better chance. I could go on and name many, many more. Do I have enough time? Or
I think we're wrapping up soon, though.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to our time. I will say that I have learned so much about plants and species, and just great stuff that I really didn't know. Judith, thanks so much.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. Thank you both.
That was Judith Lavin are talking to us about gardening and biodiversity and their importance and the role that the plant species do play in our garden.
I'm so glad that they're doing it this way and organizing it so that we know where the native plants are when we go to big box stores, to the plant sections, or nurseries. It's awesome. After the break, we're going to talk about Robert Half and their release of the State of Canadian Hiring Research, which reveals companies' hiring plans and pain points. We're going to learn more about this after the break on Kelly and Company. like I promised, giving you that AMI at the Movies teaser this week, which is Saturday night, the 24th of July, on AMI at the Movies, right at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on AMI TV. We're watching The Family Man. This is a funny movie. Nicolas Cage stars as Jack, a man living a fast-paced lifestyle that changes one Christmas night. There's a lot to be known here. Tune into AMI at the Movies Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on AMI TV just before the movie starts, so you can hang out with Kelly and I, who host the movies. And this week, like I said, The Family Man. Right now, you're listening to Kelly and Company, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on AMI Audio with Ramya Amudan and Brock Richardson.
Ramya, all this proves is that you're a woman of your word. You promised the audience that they would learn what movie this Saturday, and you delivered, as always. There you go.
Well, I'm going to say, as always, sometimes I forget. But yes, if I don't forget, I will keep my promises.
Fair enough. This is a segment that I have been really looking forward to, and we're going to speak about Robert Half and their State of Canadian Hiring Research, which reveals companies' hiring plans and pain points. We chat more about this with the Vice President of Robert Half Canada, our good friend, Michael French. Michael, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me on. I love joining you guys.
We certainly love having you. Can you give us some background on your State of Canadian hiring, and what did you guys look into in this regard?
Well, it's really interesting. So back in June, we surveyed 800 senior managers at professional type organizations. These would be people working in offices generally. And we asked them sort of what's happening with hiring and what are you experiencing? And so the results were pretty staggering. 43% of those 800 managers said that they're going to add net new positions in the next quarter. And 54% said they're going to call back people who may have vacated or were laid off due to COVID. So those are pretty staggering positive numbers.
They are. Well, that's really, really good stuff. And I felt like, there was some good news coming along, but I really thought it had more to do with the work from home. But this is amazing about the actual hiring or wanting to hire more people. So did anything surprise you about the research from all of this, Michael?
Well, the big surprise is the challenge that they're having. So 21%, so 1 out of 5 said they're having a hard time finding candidates with the right skill set. So that means they're looking for fairly skilled people, and they can't find them. And then 18% said they're finding a challenge finding people who fit the right company culture. And that's always a big one because you have to have that right fit for your team to work so well. And the third point of 14% is, and this sort of states to the speed of the market, they're having trouble landing the best talent because their processes are taking so long. So the market's moving really fast and they can't land people fast enough. So some challenge in the marketplace, finding the right people.
Very specific.
Was there any Go ahead.
Well, and they're having to come up with some pretty interesting ways to entice them. So 4 out of 10 are offering more time off. So I think we've been at home now for a year and a half, and many people haven't taken any real vacation. So think how lovely it would be if you next year get an extra week or maybe 2 weeks. And the other thing that's sort of new, and you got to think, the job market's been pretty strong for a number of years. And during COVID, if you haven't taken some time to dust off your job descriptions, maybe update your job titles, you may be falling behind in what people are looking for to be sort of appealing or the sexy job titles for the new market. And the last one, it's sort of an old school play, but offering signing bonuses to a new hire. It's always nice, start a new job, sign to get the offer and get some cash out of the gate. So 3 big things.
I find it so fascinating that you really need to almost entice people to go get jobs, this really, really surprises me, honestly, Michael.
Well, I think it's a combination of 2 things. So as we're all sitting here today, we see the end coming with COVID. We know good things are on the horizon. It may be sort of Q3, it may be Q4, but I think we all sort of recognize by next year, it'll be some kind of new normal, and hopefully this is all behind us. And so one of the challenges businesses are seeing is time to grow, but there's still many people struggling with, do I look for a job now? I'm still struggling with kids at home or elder care. Ontario's not back to sort of full release, back to normal. So the job market, there isn't as many people looking right now. So once those sort of factors come out of play, we may see some even more increase in the activity of the hiring market. But it's definitely right now a candidate's market.
And I'm curious too, because a lot of the bulk of last year, we were hearing a ton about people moving out of the cities, moving out of their original homes or where they were living into new homes and new towns even, and new provinces for some people. So are people still looking for remote work? Is this something that's still part of the equation?
I got to tell you, I think this remote work is going to be with us for quite a while. Before COVID, it was sort of we all had a friend who worked from home who seemed to have the ideal scenario, and we all wanted it. And companies said, oh, that would never work for us. And overnight, bang, it worked for many, many organizations who now said, wow, we could actually attract even better people or provide our people with some flexibility if we changed. And I think for a long time, companies sort of took a bit of an approach, well, we're the employer. It's going to be our way or the highway. They're realizing now that if they don't change, they will not be the employer of choice. And heaven forbid being stuck with the employee that nobody else wanted to hire. That would not be a good place to be.
And it's one of the reasons why we're hearing about, them saying also on the flip side, we're looking for more skilled people. We're having a hard time finding the people that we want to work with and that fit right into the culture of the workspace, because you could be more picky now. You could hire people who aren't locally there, right? Like you can hire people who are, remote, potentially across the country, and demand that the skill set be higher.
Well, there's a couple of things at play. So one of the newest terms in the last couple of years has been sort of machine learning or automation, which is elevated. So it's sort of removing some lower level positions, which were very manual, but replacing them with some very high skilled analytical roles. So as organizations sort of rebalance their human capital, there could be some more junior people who aren't there, but replaced with more senior level, higher skilled people to make the best efficiencies of this machine learning and AI. So the whole work world is skilling up, and you better be skilling up as well, or you may get left behind.
Wow. Yeah.
So this is a topic that we were discussing as we did our pre-show meeting about the non-negotiables for employers. What are some of these, and can some of these be a little bit bent anyway?
Those non-negotiables all of a sudden become pretty flexible. So one of them that employers used to always be stuck on was they wanted a very specific advanced degree. And we're finding now 1 out of 5 are willing to flex on that. They'll flex on their advanced degree, or it may be the second advanced degree they'll flex on. The other one's years of experience. So why would a person need to have 10 years of experience when maybe 5 years is appropriate or even better for them doing certain things? And then what also surprising, and I got to tell you, maybe it's not that surprising, I'm happy with, only 10% were willing to overlook the missing soft skills. And when you're hiring, soft skills are so important. So that means 9 out of 10 employers are going to hold tight to make sure that people have the right soft skills. And then the smallest percent, 9%, willing to overlook certain specific certifications. So that might be a certification in a certain field, or a second or third certification. So they're willing to flex it in many areas.
And these can be the challenges as well as the bonuses, in the companies that people end up working in. So do you mind going through some of the in-demand positions for us, if there are any specific ones, and tips for job seekers as well? Because like you said, things are really changing.
Sure. Well, let's start with the tips. So as we talk about companies having to flex, That also means for job seekers, if you don't hit all of the 5 criteria and you hit 4, make sure you apply, even if you have only 3 of the 5 criteria. So everybody knows you have to flex. So first thing is, if you hit over half those criteria, make sure you apply. Some of the hot in-demand skills sort of go by industry or by segment. So in finance and accounting, controllers, senior financial analysts, payroll, collections, bookkeeper, accounting manager, anything having to do with financial processes or an ERP. We all hear about SAP, PeopleSoft. They're always really, really big. In the administrative field, EAs, executive assistants, project managers, project coordinators, general office help is all really big. HR is exceptionally strong right now. When you think of tech, my goodness, everything in tech is hot, from developers, full stack developers, Java, it's all hot. And then in the law field, lawyers, paralegals, law clerks, their hiring's happening all over. They're all hot.
Wow.
Some of this really is some surprise to me, and you always give us great information, but this one seemed to be a hot button topic. Anything else, just quickly, maybe in about 30 seconds, that you want to cover?
I'd say this is some great news for job seekers. Don't miss the opportunity. Be aggressively looking for work. Be flexible and take advantage of working anywhere. Apply for roles that aren't in your area. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Always love having you on. And of course, that was Regional Vice President of Robert Half, friend of the program, Michael French, talking to us about companies hiring points and pain points as well. Hiring plans and pain points, on today's program.
A lot of shifts. The more we talk about this, the more it kind of feels like a whole new puzzle altogether, employment, Brock, because, things are shifting so heavily, and we're kind of getting to this place that is new territory for people being hired and the people doing the hiring. A lot of learning to do. In the next hour of Kelly and Company, we're going to flip through quirky stories from around the globe with Jeff Ryman on What in the World. We also have our roundtable conversation. Today's guest is Leanne Brown, our IT and systems specialist here at AMI. But after the break, we have The Buzz with Bill Shackleton. We'll be right back.
When you tune into the show in the middle of an interview.
Number 9 is don't believe everything you read on the internet, which is where I got this from.
You're listening to Kelly and Company on AMI Audio.
Greetings, Kelly and Company. This is Robert Just in Toronto. As always, permitting you to use this item on the air if you so desire. Rami and Brock, I'd like to weigh in on your discussion of Shakespeare. I studied a few Shakespearean plays in high school, including Julius Caesar, The Merchant of Venice, Richard II, and Twelfth Night. And this might interest you that as far as Julius Caesar and Richard II were concerned, they're tragedies, of course, as you know. Well, when I had those plays, I failed the curriculum, if you can believe that. But when I was studying The Merchant of Venice and Twelfth Night, I passed. Maybe there's a difference between failure and passing as regards tragedy versus comedy. I don't know. Just an idea I dreamed up. But my take is that Shakespeare wrote plays to be performed before an audience, not to be read out of a textbook. I think you get much more out of it if you see it acted out. And I think that's true of any playwright. I'd just like to know your take on this, and I also wonder if you have any favorite Shakespearean plays. Thank you very much.
Oh, of course, he's weighing in on Kelly and Company conversation here. We're in the second hour now of the show, and Shakespeare will bring Billy on because Bill's here for The Buzz with Bill Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. And Billy, as you're joining us right after this voicemail, I'm curious, first of all, are you a Shakespeare fan like Robert Just and I?
I studied most of the plays that he did. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I have found, it's very difficult to read that Old English in Braille. I mean, can you imagine reading it, trying to read it in Braille? Oh my gosh,
yeah.
And I did, and I agree with Robert to a point where it's better, they're not meant to be read out loud, but I think I need a translation from some of the teachers so that I could figure out what they were trying to say. And then it became much easier. And then when we did see some of these plays live, and once you actually know what the play's about, you get a much better understanding of what it is if you've read it first. So I don't know. I think there is an advantage to reading it, providing you can get through it without, I mean, it's terrible the way they're written.
By get through it, you mean like actually complete it because you stopped halfway because you couldn't do it anymore? No, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, because of the Old English. But I totally agree. And, Brocky, I'm sure all of us at some point were like, what? How do we read all these? But I think, Robert, like you said, there's a lot of great that comes with seeing the play performed, right? Experiencing it being performed on stage. Absolutely. I could never get through any of the movies or something along the lines of movies with Shakespeare. But the live performances have been hands down my favorite. Macbeth being one of my favorites to be watched being performed just because of how dark it is. Julius Caesar is a favorite of my mom's though, so we see that a lot too. But like you said, Bill, because there's so much to be dissected with Shakespeare's writing. Okay, like with what he used, why he used it, and then the whole morals and the lessons and the story being told and why he did it this way and that and the character development. There's just so much to be taken in and, noted that I also really enjoy just reading it or having it read to me because I feel like there's every time you read it, you get a bit more than the first time. I don't know if that could be said for the translations, like the modern day translations. If you read it in today's English, do you get everything you got back then? Maybe. I don't know. But I like the classics.
But I would say, guys, that you get more out of books when you read it a second time anyway. Because you read it and you read it, especially when you're doing the god-awful book reports. And I apologize to any of my English teachers, but when you read something for pleasure and then you go back and read it, it's like, oh, I kind of missed that the last time, and I find that as being the thing that I learned is the more you read something, you do get something different out of it every single time.
Yeah, it hits you differently, definitely, or you pay attention to something else that you didn't necessarily take in the first time. So thanks, Robert, for bringing up this conversation with us. Always love talking Shakespeare. And, as we continue this conversation, I realized like a few years ago, I ran a quiz on Shakespeare. And I put you guys through it, really, with the Shakespeare conversations. Billy, what do you have for us today on The Buzz? What articles did you bring?
Well, we brought this one. This is pro-vaccination businesses attacked, not physically at this point, from the Kitchener-Waterloo Record. So there was a website set up where businesses could basically volunteer that whether or not their staff have been vaccinated. It's come under fire by anti-vaxxers to the point where the creator of the website has been getting all sorts of, been getting hate mail. Some of them are serious threats. He's had to shut down the website basically because the individual businesses themselves, he is afraid that they're going to be attacked. And some of them might have been attacked already. And some of what these anti-vaxxers are doing in the case of restaurants is they're putting in fake reviews, bad reviews. And it's to the point where these businesses are, it's part of a larger conversation, and which is, do you actually, if you're a business, do you have a sign outside saying that your staff has been vaccinated or not? It's an interesting what Urbans is going to do, that's,
Yeah. Well, remember when it was like a personal thing, guys, where if you're nervous, even if you're double vaccinated, even if you're not vaccinated or whatever, if you're nervous, just put your mask on, stay socially distanced, take your time, don't go out more than you are comfortable doing. And it was really just this individual personal conversations that we were having, right? And the people around you and you were probably having. And now it is no longer that way. There's really a lot of stuff going on. Like every day I'm hearing about all these different things where anti-vaxxers are becoming, really upset on social, like in this example, Billy, or, there are places that are opening up just for people, like with Dave Brown, they were talking about places opening up just for people who are not vaccinated, gyms opening up for people who are not vaccinated, things like this. And I'm just thinking like it is getting really, really out of hand. We're now so divided in this. And though the numbers are great for people getting vaccinated, I mean, amazing, right? Let's keep going that way. That's my personal opinion. But you're still having a lot of aggressive pushback from people who can't be vaccinated or won't get vaccinated. So it's starting to get kind of scary, not just online, but I'd say in real life. And when things start opening up with borders and the conversations get bigger, I feel like it's going to get worse before it hopefully calms down a bit. Brock, you were saying?
I just feel, guys, that when we get to a point where you bring up the argument of, do we have to have signs out front of our, places saying our place is vaccinated? I think that is when we get to be a little too far, because we don't know everybody's scenario situation. What if you're allergic to like a lot of the stuff that's in the vaccine, and it's not a matter of you don't want it, it's a matter of you don't know what it's going to do to your body because you're allergic to it, or because and that's where people don't know everyone's ins and outs of the reasons why or why not they're getting it. I mean, now it's easy enough to say to people, which vaccine did you get? Whereas when it first started, that was almost taboo because it was like, doesn't matter, a vaccine's a vaccine. But now that we have, 2 or 3 different ones, people are now asking, hey, which one did you get? Oh, I got this one, etc. Right? Like, so conversation is shifting. I just fear that it's going to be shifting too far when we have to have signs outside of a business saying our company's vaccinated, come work for us.
Well, the more I take part in this discussion, the more I'm thinking the best thing to do is just open your business and people are going to show or they're not. I mean, let's forget the fact that whether you've been vaccinated or not, let's just open the business and people use common sense. If they're afraid, then put a mask on. If they're or don't show.
Exactly, Billy. But the thing is it's not going to stop there, right? You're always going to get to this level of, oh, well, we're encouraging people to get vaccinated. Well, how about those of us who don't want to? So let's discourage people and do it the other way and pull it back. So, this is how it always happens, honestly, with no matter what it is, any kind of protesting, and which is fine. We have the freedom of expression and all that over here. So, but it just gets really scary. I think it gets scary for people who are kind of sitting at their homes going, what do I do now? For reasons like you said, maybe they can't get vaccinated.
Or shaming people on one side of the fence or the other.
Absolutely.
People who are vaccinated and the other ones who aren't, saying, why did you get vaccinated? This is why you shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. Or us looking at the people who aren't vaccinated going, well, you should be vaccinated. Neither of us should be talking to the other. We all have our own reasons and we need to respect those.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, how this goes.
It will be interesting to see. And I don't know how you really get something like this into control, right? It's really about how things start, like where things are going or how we're responding, and then say, okay, now I can tell that's going to get a little ugly, but now it's beyond that. Now it's already ugly. And it's starting to get pretty crazy around here. Billy, I don't think we're going to get to another article today. We've talked ourselves to the end of the segment.
Well, all right. Then we'll get to the couple of articles tomorrow about Barcelona and the beach, and the government is planning to, and the provincial government is planning to ban cordless blinds. So we'll see. What you never know. You never know.
You never know. And those are really good ones. I'm really excited about the blinds one. I don't know what's going on there. Thanks, Billy.
Thanks a lot.
All right, Bill Shackleton joining us for the Buzz with Bill, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Wow, Brock. I mean, we're always saying, can we stop talking about COVID? We're always talking about COVID, but then something comes up and we all have a lot to say about it. So it's just how it is.
Yes, we do. It'll just mean that there'll be less work for Bill for tomorrow for the Buzz with Bill. Yeah. He's already got at least 2 articles. See, we saved him some time. You're welcome.
We're really just helping him out. You're welcome, Billy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if we're going to help out the next guy. He always pretty much knows when we're going to be really chatty. Jeff Ryman joining us for What in the World? This is where we flip through quirky stories from around the globe. We have a lot of good laughs with this one. So that's after the break here on Kelly and Company. You're listening to Kelly and Company. I'm Ramya Amuddin, and joining me to co-host the Thursday show is Brock Richardson. I want to tell you a bit about what's going on this weekend on AMI Audio. Saturday morning on The Pulse on AMI Audio. That's at 10 a.m. Eastern Time if you want to check it out. Your host, Joita Gupta, is speaking to Amy McPherson. She's a doctor, scientist at Bloorview Kids Hospital, and they're going to talk about an ongoing art exhibit illuminating. Oh, it's called Illuminary. This explores the way that youth with disabilities enact sexuality across healthcare settings. Sunday at 10 a.m., the very next day, 10 a.m. Eastern, we're going to learn or hear from Ed Tobias, who explains why he's against the idea of Disability Pride Month. That's in July. So right now, I'm really curious.
Always Pulse at 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturdays and Sundays. And of course, your host is Joita Gupta. With that, it's time to bring on Jeff Ryman for another edition of What in the World.
The defendant's guilty verdict in a firearms case can't be automatically reversed just because the judge dozed off. The cries were that of a 40-year-old parrot named Rambo. Let me out. Some of it weird, some of it just crazy. This is What in the World on Kelly and Company.
Mind-boggling.
Jeff, I think that's one of my favorite of your intros between the 3 that you have because of that infamous word mind-boggling on the end of it that we can't seem to get Ramya to say on the air. But we'll keep it.
Never said it on air again.
That's totally fine. We had a question for you because we were discussing this off the top of the show earlier. How long can you go without checking sports? I admitted that I have my Google Home that's within about 3 feet of me, and sometimes I'll have major sporting events on. Are you one of those, or can you kind of unplug for longer times?
I can definitely unplug for a longer time. It's definitely harder than it seems, especially for, sports lovers like you and I, Brock. Ramya, probably super simple for you. But yeah, honestly, usually if I go up north somewhere, like to a cottage or if I'm camping,
you unplug.
I totally unplug. Time if I'm, winding down for the night in my bed or something, I might check social media, just, a quick little refresh on Twitter and just, see what's going on that way. But honestly, whenever I'm on vacation, I pretty much disconnect from just the news cycle in general, in that usually include sports for the most part. So yes, like I don't know how long I can necessarily go for. But I for a weekend, it's honestly not a huge problem. And when I had my cottage and I'd go up there every single weekend, we got pretty much zero cell phone reception. So it was hard, even if I wanted to. It was pretty hard to even refresh Twitter or even receive receive text or call somebody. So disconnecting, I really dig it. It is honestly nice, but I think a weekend is probably the most that I would do.
See, that's where you're a bit more, I guess, at an advantage, because obviously if it wasn't available to me, I would not be able to do it. But I am guilty as charged when I'm away for the weekend or for a couple of days. I'm like, but I want to know how the Blue Jays did, or I want to know what's going on here. And it is to the detriment of my fiance, who's like, you're supposed to be on holidays. What are you doing? And it's just like, but I just love sports as an overall, right? And it's even hard for me, on Fridays when I'm not on the neutral zone. It's like, but I want to know how they're doing. And then again, my fiance repeats, but you're on holiday, right? So it's really tough when you do things you enjoy as part of your job, but it is important to unplug at the same time. Jeff, what do you got for us that's in the weird and wacky world today?
Yeah, so this first article honestly sort of left me speechless on multiple fronts. And it's pretty crazy. A Wyoming rancher who was pinned by an all-terrain vehicle survived on beer and bottled water for 2 days. Yeah, beer and bottled water. He survived. 53-year-old Frank Reynolds is expected to recover from that ordeal. He told the Gillette News Record that he was trying to round up a cow and a calf on a neighbor's pasture outside Gillette when the vehicle tipped over on him on Sunday. Worried family members eventually learned that Reynolds had gone to the property where he was laying with a dislocated shoulder and broken ribs.
Oh
Authorities say, I know. Reynolds had a cooler and was able to ration a couple bottles of water and Keystone Light beers until a neighbor found him on Tuesday. So could you imagine just going out, trying to round up some cattle, and next thing you know, your vehicle, you're pinned underneath it, you've got a dislocated shoulder, you've got some broken ribs, and you survive off of water and beer. Incredible.
I mean, hopefully the beer helped like numb the pain a bit. I don't know if it's that much beer.
Yeah.
On an empty stomach? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, honestly, like it makes sense. And obviously there's carbs in beer. So, I mean, that would fill you up a little bit, I guess, if you were hungry. I mean, I believe the human body can go around 2 weeks or so without having any food. It's, I think it's around 2 to 3 days if you don't have any water. So thank goodness that he did have, looks like a couple of bottles of water and a couple of beers, which would also keep you hydrated to a certain extent. And thank goodness people found him. That could have been a scary, scary situation for him, just lying there for 2 days, and what could have happened if somebody didn't find him. So just an incredible story. And it almost reminds me, I don't know if you guys watched The Ranch, but there was something similar that happened in that TV show on Netflix, and where he was pinned against a vehicle, one of the main characters, and just waited there, and then eventually somebody helped him off the ranch. So incredible story from Wyoming, and thank goodness that he's going to make a full recovery, and I'm sure he'll be back out there and maybe a little bit more cautious next time. But beer and water literally saved this man's life. So I'm sure he's pretty happy that he's still alive.
Something is better than nothing, and I can guarantee you there are some beer drinkers out there who are applauding because they're sitting there going, see, I knew that beer could do something beneficial for me. So that's good, but I'm really glad to hear that he made a full recovery as well. But
I just wonder what he's going to feast on. Like when I see, because I watch a lot of I Survived, right, episodes, and it's very not, it's really scary, like Mayday. But, you know, when people have to survive in the middle of the sea and, or, you know, stuck somewhere or things like that, where the first thing I think of being so in love with food is, oh my gosh, without food for this many days, and then what would you feast on when you get back home?
Well, in this guy's case, I probably wouldn't feast on cows because this is probably half of the reason.
No burgers?
I feel like, you know, something that would fill you up quite substantially. Maybe like a nice pasta dinner, like lots of carbs. Because that, like, if I'm really hungry, it's carbs. Like, I crave carbs. Like, give me all the bread, give me all the unlimited salad and breadsticks and in pasta and all that. So I would probably lean towards that, or maybe some sort of chicken wings or something. And then obviously have to have a massive chocolate sundae or something. So
delish.
Yeah, but definitely not steak.
You always need that sugar after you eat carbs. It's just the thing that happens, and then you need a solid hour and a half nap because you're exhausted after all that bread and pasta, Jeff.
Yeah. Guys, actually, speaking of food, we can segue nicely into this next article. And I know we've talked about this multiple times, probably in the past couple of months, but billions of people around the world regularly eat insects, but they're not commonly found in our Western diets. That could change because as Earth's growing population puts more pressure on global food production, insects are increasingly seen as a viable food source. Experts say they're rich in protein. I know. Rich in protein, yet can be raised much more sustainably than beef or pork. EU regulatory changes are making it easier for them to market insects directly to the bloc's consumers. Humans may also end up eating more insects indirectly because of the growing market for bug-based animal feed after the EU and the US approved insect protein for fish and chicken feed. I'm sort of cringing just reading this article to you guys.
I can't even think of this as food.
Yeah, I agree. Like insects, like, you know, when I think of insects, I think of like mosquitoes and black flies, and I hate those things because they eat me and I don't want to eat them. Obviously, we wouldn't be eating mosquitoes and black flies, but, you know, just insects in general, I think just creep people out a little bit. But
there are enough people. Like, don't you guys know people who've tried, you know, cricket?
Oh, yeah.
Chocolate covered crickets or cricket powder in their smoothies or something like that. And honestly, the only way to get me to try this stuff, and we've been talking about it at least on the show for a year, okay, with this stuff becoming popular. But the only way for me to have done this is if a friend didn't tell me about it, they tossed it into my food, and then I ate it, and then they were like, surprised, you had cricket powder in there, and then I would disown them as a friend.
It's like, oh, this is really nice. This salad has a really nice crunch to it. Are these sesame seeds? No, those are cricket legs or something.
You would have to cover it in chocolate for me to do anything of the sort.
You would try it?
To the point that someone would say, would you like any cricket with that chocolate? And then at that point, it's like, what's the point? Because I've covered it with a pound of chocolate. No, you said...
That's still brave to me.
Yeah. Sometimes we do it indirectly. I can accept indirectly because I don't know about it. But if someone said to me, here, try this, and I knew about it, not a chance would I be trying that. No,
like,
thank you.
Personally, I'm not the most adventurous eater. Like, I'm not adventurous, but I wouldn't say I'm like super outgoing with my eating. And this is just a hard no for me all the way around. You know, even if you put chocolate on it, I mean, that chocolate ratio would have to be like 4-1. So therefore, it'd just be the majority of chocolate. Yeah.
For me, it's just like mentally knowing that the crunch in that chocolate is not crushed almonds is like, no, I can't do it.
Like the one thing I'm thinking of when we say chocolate covered insects, I'm almost thinking of like, you know, those crispy chocolate bars where it has like the little pieces of Rice Krispie in it. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm just imagining this being. And I don't feel like it would be that bad. Like you said, Remy, if you had no idea that, you know, if somebody hands you a chocolate bar and you're like, oh, this is pretty good, and they don't tell you till after the fact, then maybe you might enjoy it and then hate yourself after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I would knowingly eat insects in any way, shape, or form, whether that's like, you know, crushed up into a salad or somehow deep fried or, you know, covered in chocolate, whatever it may be.
Oh, what if it
I just
smells?
don't think I could get. Yeah, I don't even know if there would be that much of a smell, to be honest. I mean, maybe there would be, but I don't know. I've never tried it before. And don't plan.
You'll never find out.
No, thank you. No, thank you is what I'm going with there, Jeff. Thanks so much for another great segment of What in the World.
No problem, guys. See ya.
That was What in the World with Jeff Ryman, who joins us on the second and fourth Thursday of the month.
Coming up after the break, we have our weekly roundtable with your host, me, and Lee. Join us. She's our audio and IT system specialist. We'll be right back with that on Kelly and Company.
Isn't it convenient that we have a round table?
Well, it's actually oval. Just saying.
The blind guy feels it now, goes, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess it is oval.
Kind of oval.
Every Thursday,
Every Thursday we have the round table, and we're joined this week by Leanne Brown, our IT specialist. Leanne, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Pretty well. We've lost Remy a little bit here briefly.
Yep.
Why don't we start with what you... Oh, Remy is back. Okay.
I'm back. It's just the technology gremlins testing me on roundtable time. Thank you for picking it up, Brock.
As we say in technology, nothing works 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it can't be truer than today. Leanne, thank you on the roundtable today, and say that Kelly McDonald, he handpicks these subjects for us weekly, and he brings it on, and then he holds the key to the city, and he never tells us what's up. But you know what? Today he let me in on it because I'm going to be hosting the roundtable with you guys. So really excited to chat with you. And don't worry, it's not too scary. I'll let Brock go first every single time. I'm kidding. But let's start with this piece of information. So one day after, and this was from yesterday, by the way, so now it's 2 days after, but one day after Jeff Bezos made his historic flight to space, the Amazon founder was facing a lot of criticism, and reporter Andrew Grimmett has more on this.
Jeff Bezos quickly came under fire after giving credit to Amazon workers and customers for funding his flight. The online criticism swift, one person posting, "I'd like a refund." Bezos later responding to criticism that his money could have been better spent.
If you don't focus on the future, then you don't have explorers, you don't have progress.
Bezos also announcing a $200 million donation to nonprofits here on Earth, $100 million each to chef Jose Andres and former Obama administration advisor Van Jones.
Kind of thought that this was a weird timing. I like the fact that he's giving, different money to different people, etc. But I thought it was weird timing. I did really enjoy I was watching breakfast television, actually, and they were going to commercial break, Leanne, and all of a sudden it was like, let's break to this story. There's a flight going on, etc., to space, and what do we think? And then, of course, one of the reporters said, I hope Bezos is doing really well with his lack of money. There was a bit of teasing going on in that regard as well. Leanne, what did you think about this whole experience?
I think that Jeff Bezos was pretty tone deaf honestly saying that he was thanking his employees because all the money that he's made from Amazon is off the backs of his employees.
That's right.
So completely tone deaf. And I think it's a great thing that he's donating money to various charities. That's wonderful. But what about your employees? Like, why not give them a raise? I mean, a lot of his employees, they worked right through the pandemic. A lot of them ended up coming down with COVID and being really sick. And you reward them by saying, thanks for putting me into space. Like, why not make it easier for them to pay their bills? Because a lot of those people, they struggle every day to pay their bills and live their lives. So why not make it easier for them? I don't get it.
And to add on to this picture, guys, Bezos has said that he finances the rocket company by selling $1 billion in Amazon stock each year. So it really doesn't help the fact that, he gets to reap the benefits by going up there with several other people.
Yeah, it really doesn't help the fact that he, benefits from all this, certainly. But I guess, like you said, Leanne, it's one of those things where you go, oh, okay, at least you kind of made it work when you say, oh, well, we'll just do this and that. Is space something that you would consider, doing if the opportunity presented itself?
It's actually funny you mention that because when I was applying for jobs, actually, before I ended up landing here, thankfully, I interviewed at a place where the president of the radio station I was applying at was a bit of a weird duck, and he actually asked me, that was one of his questions in my interview, was if you had the ability and the chance to go into space and we're assured of a safe passage there and back, would you do it? And I said, well, of course, because you want to see what's out there.
Yeah, sure. And I think for me, if the opportunity presented itself and I could go, I would go. But I don't know if there's a lot there for me on a visual perspective. I'm not one to be like, oh, let's cram myself into a situation and fly up somewhere where I have no control over nothing. It would be a cool experience, but I'm just not sure that I would be totally comfortable, really.
Well, yeah, and if I was going to have that experience, I think I would rather it be, by NASA, rather than some millionaire that built his own rocket ship. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Guys, I'm back. I just wanted to announce myself in. I'm having a lot of tech issues, so you're going to be joining me over the phone. And I want to move on to this next piece of conversation as well that Kelly found for us. So Olympic sponsor Toyota is pulling games-related TV ads in Japan. Let's take a listen to this.
Toyota Motor Corporation, one of Japan's leading companies and a worldwide Olympic sponsor, will not air Olympic-themed advertisements on Japanese television during the Tokyo Games, which begin Friday. The decision underscores the divisions within Japan over whether the Games should be held with COVID-19 infections on the rise in the country. In addition, Toyota's chief executive, Akio Toyoda, will not attend Friday's opening ceremony. Toyota has no plans to adjust its Olympic marketing in the United States. I'm Mike Gracia.
So, we're seeing the protests and the people in Japan making their voices heard about the concerns that they're having. And now we're seeing this, Brock, a complete boycott by Toyota, if you ask me. Is this continuing to underline the concern that, everybody's already having, as we heard earlier on in the show when we were talking about it, and protests and things being held? And is it making a bigger difference? Is it adding to the pile? Is it a bigger add to the pile because it's Toyota and not just, the civilians anymore, just in quotes?
I would say that it's adding to it, but I think we are too far removed, as I mentioned this. If Toyota made this stand a while ago and said, we're not going to do this, and other bigger advertisement companies said we're not going to do this, then maybe it would have a bigger impact. But we're at the games, like it's here, it's right in front of me. If I look at the date and time on the clock, I just don't know what kind of big impact this has. Do I support it? 100% I support it, but I think we're too late in the game.
And Leanne, I want to take this to the angle around vaccinations. Okay, so we're hearing that the numbers of people getting the virus in Japan are going up, and that the vaccination rates are terrible because of the resources. So, do actions like this make a stance when it comes to the vaccinations? Does Toyota doing this, does it directly impact how we're getting impacted by the vaccination efforts for the games?
I would say I don't really think so, because, the vaccination rates are there for, the low uptake is there for many reasons, a lot of which I'm not aware of. I don't know how much of it is because of trouble procuring vaccines in the first place, enough doses, or if it's the vaccine hesitancy going on. And if it's vaccine hesitancy, how much is that just, regular worry, or how much of it's being fueled by the conspiracy angle? So, I think, Toyota jumping on the train at this point isn't really going to have much of an effect, if any.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really, as going back to what Brock was saying, I really do feel like, if Toyota or advertisers or bigger entities had maybe put some of their foot in the game a little bit earlier, we might have seen actual turnaround of the games themselves, or, seen a bigger effort when it comes to the vaccinations, or people really being heard. But right now, I think the problem is that we're already so far into it that people are not being heard, and the games are going forward. So what exactly are people's efforts doing, right? Like, where are we going with these efforts, Brock?
Yeah, and like I had mentioned too, and I'll take it a step further. Do I think Toyota is acknowledging what they should have done? Yes, by saying we're not going to do this, but by doing it, everyone goes, yeah, this is what you should have done, but you were almost too chicken to do it earlier. And I think that this is what some people would expect, but I will reiterate again, it's far too late in the game to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I want to, if you're comfortable doing so, switch over to another topic. A Colorado man has been convicted of a vehicular homicide for speeding, crashing, and killing another driver while he live streamed it all. Let's hear this.
Accused of driving as fast as 167 miles an hour on a Denver area highway and live streaming it on Facebook while talking to viewers, Brian Kirby, now 44. The district attorney says during that 2018 drive, Kirby crossed from the left lane to the right and crashed into a sedan from behind while doing 120. The phone appeared to tumble inside Kirby's car. The other car crashed. Its driver, Robert Hamilton, died at the scene, say cops and prosecutors. Kirby drove away. A jury convicted him of vehicular homicide and other charges. Sentencing's in September. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Wow. I mean, not only is it completely unfortunate, but this whole conversation around, this being an extreme case, but there's this real big movement, and it may not be conscious, but it's happening everywhere, where there seems to be a lot of incidents like this, Leanne, where people they have their phones out, right? They're shooting on their phones, and something really newsworthy or incredible happens, and somebody has it on their phone, the videos, to talk about more unfortunate incidences from last year and the year before with George Floyd and everybody else. People have it on their phone. So we're able to utilize this evidence or these resources that we now have, and having our smartphones out all the time. But is it coincidental? Are we that quick to press record on our devices, Leanne?
I think it's a double-edged sword, because like you were saying, it's good to have it in cases of the George Floyd incident where you can see exactly what happened, and people can't get away with saying it never happened because you have the evidence. But when it comes to just regular day-to-day life, I don't know what point humanity has made it to at this point, where the search for personal fame by streaming every moment of your life, including driving in a car, I don't understand the mindset. I never will. And then to have something like tragedy like this happen just makes it all so much worse.
Absolutely. For anyone who watches Black Mirror on Netflix, a Netflix original, there's an episode where this exact same thing happens. But, people aren't paying attention to this girl who's running around the street trying to figure out something that's going on. She's being stalked or something of that nature. And instead of anybody actually helping her out, they're all in their homes, out the windows, filming what's going on. And I mean, every single person in the area has their phone out and they're filming. And I wonder, Brock, I mean, again, another extreme example, right? And it's dystopian, but can you see something like this happening to you one day or to people around you where either A, you end up online because somebody else was filming something either horrific or dramatic happening to you, or the flip side, not to put you on the spot, but how often do you snap photos and videos and you think, oh, this is a Kodak moment, rather than, being present in the moment itself? Because I'm telling you, it's happened to me.
I believe that there is a time and a place to snap those pictures and videos when you're having an experience that is cool, when you're in Europe, when you're somewhere across the world. Those are the right times to do that. The example that I'll give you where I thought it was cringeworthy, Rami and Leanne, was with this tornado in Barrie that took place. There were videos surfacing of people that were like shooting the tornado as it was coming at them. And honestly, I sat there and I thought, if that was me, that's not a situation, guys, where I'm like, yeah, let's pull out my smartphone and take a video of the tornado that's coming at me and that could, destruct my home and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a moment where I go, huh? Like, what am I missing here? Because that's not a moment where I would go, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. And the thing is, right before this segment, Leanne, Jeff Ryman was talking to us about unplugging, right? And I think there's maybe a version of unplugging that we could be used to individually in our own lives, right? Like going up to the cottage or going camping or knowing that you're not going to have Wi-Fi at a certain place. But then I wonder still, do you not take pictures at the cottage? Do you not take videos at the cottage? There's still some level of an extension of our hand being our smartphone, right? Like if I leave my phone at home, well, I'm at home 24/7 now, but what I mean is if I was going to work and I forgot my phone at home, there's a part of me that is always a little anxious. What if people need to get a hold of me? What if, and I'll blame it on all these different things, etc. But there's a part of me that's constantly thinking about my phone. And it's not necessarily because I'm constantly snapping videos or photos, but it's just this extension of us now. We're a part of our identity is in our social media. It's in our photo and video library, right? It's there.
Yeah. Like Brock said, though, I think there's a time and a place. Like, yes, when I go to the cottage, if it's a beautiful sunset, then I'll walk out on the dock and I'll take a picture of that sunset, or I'll set up my phone, against something on a table to do the time lapse of the sunset. But I wouldn't film while I'm driving a boat, because there's too much danger there of what could go wrong.
Exactly. But like we've talked about on a bunch of different scenarios in today's show, sometimes we just take things to the other extreme, and we're really seeing it. It's very potent now. Yeah. Leanne, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the roundtable with us and really going through this experimental phase of others running the roundtable aside from Kelly. But appreciate it so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Anytime. This is a world of fun.
Thank you. Leanne Brown joining us on our roundtable. She's our IT specialist, systems IT specialist here at AMI. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with wrapping up the show, and hopefully I can get off my phone. We'll be right back.
Talk about a rough time. Well, thank you for joining in with us and hanging in here on Kelly and Company while I work through some internet issues. We had a very eventful roundtable, but that's how the roundtable is for me, I guess, whether I'm on the one end of it or the other end. Brock, thank you for filling in and helping out as well. And I just want to say, if you want to listen back to any of our segments from today, because we had some great conversations, we'll go through some examples in a sec. Just go to your favorite podcast platform, and there you can find us on demand, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Search for Kelly and Company. You can find us in full show format as well as segmented format. And the full show has Brock's vanity card at the end of it, where he chats a little bit about, what did you say, Brock? It was Olympic related?
It was Olympic related and how events start before the opening ceremonies, which I feel is kind of weird.
Exactly. So you got that to look forward to. But Brocky, if people are going to their favorite podcast platform and searching for Kelly and Company, what are some highlights from today that you would recommend they check out?
Even though we only got to the Shakespeare discussion and the COVID-19 vaccination, I really liked the topics with Bill, and I think that we got some really good stuff in there, in that everyone has their own opinion on COVID-19 vaccinations. And he was talking about online how there was a platform that is pretty well being sabotaged and had to be taken down. And I just got concerned about how far this was going to go. So I thought that topic with Bill was really good this afternoon.
It was. I was saying jokingly over the break after that, we really had to pass the conch shell around because we were all like, my turn. I want to say something. It was a really engaging conversation. So thanks to Billy for that. We also chatted with Judith Lavin, who joins us bi-weekly to talk gardening and answer all our questions about native plant species and how that helps to have them in our gardens for bettering our biodiversity. So really fascinating. She put some tons of examples in there for us to check out. So check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Now let's also find out what's happening on tomorrow's edition of Now with Dave Brown. That's our morning show on AMI Audio and AMI TV at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Paul Daniel is one of the producers, and he's here to give us a preview. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Ramya. Hello, Brock. On tomorrow's show, the Friday News panel with Megan Gilmore and Michelle McQuigg joined Mike Ross, filling in for Dave Brown, to discuss some of the newsier stories of the week, including new research suggests eating disorders amongst young people is on the rise during the pandemic. So the panel will discuss how the pandemic's impact on young people, particularly in terms of eating disorders. With billionaires blasting into orbit, like Mr. Bezos and Mr. Branson earlier this month, the panel asked whether or not the private sector space race is a good thing. And entertainment critic Michael McNeely will preview the upcoming Disney film, The Jungle Cruise.
Okay, packed Friday show. Looking forward to further discussion on the space travel and about the eating disorders question. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul Daniels, one of the producers on Now with Dave Brown. Check them out, 9 a.m. Eastern Time on AMI Audio and AMI TV. You got your choice over there. Brocky, thank you so much for hanging in with me today. It was a lot of fun chatting. I was thinking back to our conversations on insects with Jeff Ryman, and you kind of willingly, like compared to Jeff and I, kind of with a ton of chocolate being like, okay, I'll try an insect. So, it's different.
Yeah, it would have to be really covered in chocolate. Always enjoy this show, and you never know where you're going to go. So really enjoy getting to fill in on whatever seat I get the opportunity to do so.
Yes, you're here to represent the adventurous, Brocky, with the insect conversation. Thank you so much. Have a great Thursday night.
You too.
We'll check in with tomorrow.
Hey guys, it's Brock Richardson, co-host of today's Kelly and Company. I just thought I would discuss something that on the forefront of some people's mind anyways, and that is that the Olympic Games is beginning tomorrow with the opening ceremony at 6 a.m. in the morning Eastern Time. And for me, the strange thing about this is there was two